really made me realize that without growth, there just it's hard to be happy. We need to constantly keep moving. It kind of gave me a glimpse of what it's like, to be old. Like I felt like I was old, and I just want to live my life in a way that even when I'm old in years, I still have that growth mindset that I keep wanting to learn and do new things.
This is the Gold Medal Mindset, where we bring you all things winning in business, sport, and life. I'm Dr. Jason Richardson, pro BMX world champion and Pan Am Games gold medalist. Now I'm a professional speaker, author, and winning mindset coach. Thanks for joining in. Get ready to mine for gold as we challenge your perception to change your results. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gold Medal Mindset. And guess what I'm going to say? I'm super excited to have this guest, Mr. Keith McArthur, author of his awesome, amazing, I got a copy ahead of time, 18 Steps to Own Your Life. Simple powers for a healthier, happier you. We have got to talk about that. Mr. Keith, thanks for being on the show.
So good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. Well, couldn't help it. We were talking just a bit. You're in Canada. I'm in Carlsbad. We were talking about the my Canadian connection, it seems. The energies and the forces of the world seem to push me towards Canada and vice versa. I've been on several podcasts with Canadian chiropractors, Ed Osborne, and,
oh yeah,
yeah, and things of the such. And I've obviously raced quite a bit in Canada. And then here you are on the show. Just so happens you're in Canada. So
I am. I'm in Toronto.
You're in
Toronto. Am I your first Canadian guest?
You are probably my third or fourth.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a Canada connection I have here. So I might have to go live in Canada one day.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds good.
We'll do a tour.
Yeah. So I'm always impressed when someone writes a book, and you actually went out there and said my instruction manual. So I'm gonna give the show to you, right? Because and people like instructions. It's kind of weird, right? Humans don't want to be told anything, but at the same time, really want to be told everything. So I like how you're owning that just right away. But you had a second chance in life, and it made you a better human. And I have a golden question that I ask everybody on the show. So I'll ask you that at the end. You'll probably answer it along the way, but tell us about how a second chance at life made you a better human. Let's go from there.
Yeah, so the second chance at life that I'm talking about is that my little sister donated a kidney to me. So about 2 years ago, I've had kidney disease for a long time, like 17 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I first found out that I had problems with my kidneys. And at the time, I barely even thought anything about it. It actually came up when I was just doing like a random urine test for insurance that I was getting through work. And so I started seeing a doctor like once a year and everything seemed okay. But then about 2 years ago, things really got real and my kidneys were starting to kind of rapidly decline. And just over, about 2 years ago, I was getting close to the point of kidney failure. And the doctors told me that I would have to either get a transplant or dialysis soon or I would die. And so, it's kind of a scary thing. And it's weird the way that kidney disease works because your kidneys are failing and you actually are literally dying, although you're probably not going to die because you've got those two things at the end. So it's kind of like if you were to take some poison and it was slowly poisoning you over time, but you knew there was an antidote that you would get at some point. It's kind of like that with kidney disease. And so as I was going through this, I was getting sicker and sicker. And I was feeling, tired, and it was getting harder to kind of focus and do what I needed to do, starting to feel depressed, all kinds of kind of effects. And I also, really wanted the transplant instead of the dialysis, because if you get dialysis, your lifestyle really changes. Mm-hmm. You're hooked up to a machine for, half of your life, basically, and your blood is continuously taken out of your body and cleaned and then put back in. And those people that are on dialysis, I mean, it's an amazing thing that they can get that, but it's still, you're still sick while you're on it. You don't feel good. You feel groggy. And it does lower your longevity when you're on dialysis. So the transplant is what I really wanted. And of course, I kind of go to my worst place where I start feeling like, who's going to want to give a kidney to me? And I was feeling scared that, maybe people didn't like me enough to want to do something like that to me. But the amazing thing, and this is one of the great things that came out of this, is that I had so many people offering to help me out. So it wasn't just my sister who went through the whole thing, but I had, another sister, I had cousins, I had my wife. There was even this one guy actually who lived in a different country. I'd never met him in real life. Over 10 years ago, we had done some work together and we talked a couple times on conference calls, and we were still connected through social media, and he offered to donate a kidney to me. So, that was just a great feeling, all these people that were coming forward. And the amazing thing is my sister did this to me, and I went from feeling like I was dying to within a month just feeling back to my old self. And I kind of made me realize that I had never really embraced my life the right way. And so that's how I kind of, changed things. And I went on this path to figure out what is my own personal instruction manual? How do I learn to live properly, to be happier and healthier and more organized and more productive and have better relationships? And, it's probably pretty similar to getting that kind of gold medal mindset that you talk about on your podcast. It was my own journey. And so I decided to put some of what I learned into this book.
Wow. Whoa. Okay. So let's back up here, because there's a lot in that story. And that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. We could talk about Canadian healthcare, U.S. healthcare, dialysis versus, so things I just don't know. My curiosity.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be selfish a bit. Does there need to be a match with kidney transplants? Is that the deal? Is there a matching thing?
There does, yeah. So the most important thing is that you have a compatible blood type.
Okay.
So it's similar to the kind, what you would need if you were to get a transfusion or something like that.
Right.
So that's critical. If you don't have the compatible blood type, it's not going to work. But then they do much more elaborate testing. And it turned out that my little sister was the perfect match. There's this testing you can do where you can get a score of up to 6, and if the higher the better. And she was a 6, which is considered a perfect match. And so it was really, really a miracle. They'll do a transplant if you're lower than that. They'll do it if you're like a 3 out of 6. But she was right there at the 6.
Okay. Another question out of curiosity. So what happens with the other person, right? So their kidney is then taken. You have 2, so they're going to give you 1, let you kind of hold 1 forever.
Yeah.
But what happens? What's the recovery like for the other person? Your sister. Like, how do we go on with 1 kidney?
So, I mean, it's a major operation, and even before you get to the surgery, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of tests. She has to take a lot of time off. Had to take a lot of time off work to go in and get tested for the compatibility, and just to make sure that she didn't have any health problems that we weren't aware of that would get worsened her kidney. And then it's major surgery. She goes through that, and then it's a lot of pain after. She has to take at least a month off work to recover. But within maybe 6 weeks, the pain's gone and she's back to normal. And actually, even within a couple of weeks, her kidney function is back in the normal level. So the other kidney will grow in size, and really you don't need 2 functioning kidneys, which is why we have this kind of amazing ability to have living kidney donations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool. So, and the reason why I wanted you to talk about that is because I actually know some people who have had this issue and are having this issue. My father's a contractor. He's actually building a dialysis center in Vegas. And I think it's just kind of weird how that energy kind of brings people in the right place. So I just think it's important that people understand what it's like on the other end. So it sounds like, obviously there's some effort involved in time, but the overall give is not, it's not like you're going to have like ongoing health problems or anything. Like you deal with this rough patch of discomfort, and then you move on, which is super important to know. And hopefully that inspires people to, if they know somebody with a kidney issue or someone in need, that they get tested and consider being a donor. So
yeah,
that's my PSA.
absolutely to that. And just to add to the PSA, I mean, the other thing is just making sure that your loved ones know that if you were to die unexpectedly, that you want to donate your organs. Like, that's the easiest thing in the world to do, and that can save so many lives.
Wow, cool. All right, I think we've like worn out the kidney thing. So not to diminish it, my friend, not to diminish it.
Yeah,
so,
not at all.
Yeah. So all right. So owning your life. What were you doing before, or I guess maybe even during all of this? Like,
Yeah.
What was your gig? What was your hustle? Because I feel like you talk about a pivot. It's one of your steps. So
I've done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I worked for about 10 years as a journalist. After that, I worked doing PR and social media, and worked as an executive in one of the biggest companies in Canada. So I was the VP of social media there. And then I left and started up a publishing business. And so, what I'm working on now isn't a complete change in direction. I'm still focusing on creating and selling great content. Mm-hmm. But what I've done is I've kind of shifted my perspective, and I'm focusing much more on what's most interesting to me now. And that is, learning how to be a better human, learning how to be healthier and happier and all those other things. And so I'm learning, and while I'm learning, I'm writing about it. So, I kind of have this belief that all of us can be learners and teachers at the same time. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying that my book is everything, but after the transplant, I kind of went on a rampage to I kind of realized that even though it's not like I was a failure before. I had a great family, good jobs. I kind of took care of my health. I felt like I was mostly a good person. But, to use the parallel from your show, I didn't quite have that gold medal mindset. I maybe had the fourth place kind of mindset. And so after the transplant, it made me feel like I didn't really know enough about how to be human. And so I started consuming everything I could, books and podcasts and everything else. And I found that there was actually a lot of garbage, but at the same time, there was so much wisdom. And so 18 Steps to Own Your Life is basically me distilling what works for me and some of my own discoveries and putting them into a book.
Mm-hmm. So I talk about this concept with clients and really with everybody, but it's win the day. Right? What are you doing to win the day? And then you have this concept of choosing every day. Or choose every day. Yeah. So let's get right into it. Like, of all the 8, let's talk about choosing the day. But then I want to get into the steps, and I want to ask you your favorite. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm rushing because I'm excited about this stuff. But
do it.
Talk about choose every day, because I think a lot of people. I don't want to say take life for granted, and I don't want to come off high horse here. However. Even myself, I think we wake up and it's like, okay, it's Thursday, it's Friday, it's Monday. And there's these preconceived notions or beliefs of what that day is because it's that day. And not only, I should say what you're going to do that day, but it's almost as if you don't think about your day other than the fact that you're going to do these things that you've always done.
Yeah, so true. And I think that, after after the transplant, I started making changes in my life, and people were noticing a difference in me. And, one night I was out with my wife on a date without the kids, which
congrats
is not as common as it should be.
That's a win.
Yeah. And she kind of turned to me and she said, like, what's different about you? Like, you just seem so different lately. And so that felt really good. But then within a few weeks, I felt like I was going backwards again. And there was this one day where I was going in for a mindfulness meditation class. And when I got to, it was actually at the YMCA, when I got to the Y to take this class, the instructor wasn't there that day. The class had been canceled. And the other people that had shown up were kind of like, okay, like no big deal. But I got so upset about it, and I felt like I had to tweet about it, and I went and talked to, I complained to the management at the Y, and like I emailed the person.
That's not very mindful. Keith.
It's not very mindful, right? Like how ironic. And I kind of realized that I had made this choice to try to change my life, but it's not enough to make that choice once. You have to choose every single day. And the other thing is that it's not about, like, there's 18 steps in here, but really when you're changing your life, it's not about any big steps. It's really a million tiny steps that you have to make. And every day, if you make, one of those million tiny steps, you're doing something right.
Right. So I like that because you mentioned that. That's the paradox. And it's so funny. I posted something 2 days ago on Facebook. It said, big announcement. I'm doing some of the same things I did last year. And then hashtag consistency. Then the next day I said, big announcement. I'm changing some of the things I did last year. Evolve. And people were like, hey, which one is it? You're sending me mixed signals. And the part of it was an experiment for me, but the other piece was, and I'm a stickler on words, is, I said some, right? I'm changing some things and I'm doing some things the same. But there is a yin and yang to this. There is kind of I don't want to say a balance, but we kind of live inside of conflict, right? We're humans that we have these amazing drives, even as we mentioned earlier. People don't want to be told anything, and then at the same time they look for the instruction manual. I mean, that's just we're a beautiful we're a beautiful mess in a way. So I love how you preface that with a million tiny steps, but there's 18. There's 18, but there's a million. So,
well, I would say that each of these, I mean, that the 18 steps are really, they're really more like themes, and within each of these themes, I would say that there's lots of steps.
I get it, but the thing is, but that's the whole point, right? Like, we can actually scratch deeper than the surface.
Yeah,
and
because I think if you're doing the same thing that you did yesterday, then you're not growing, and if you're not growing, then what is there? Like, we need to keep growing every day in some way.
Right. And that's another theme that I keep running up against. And I even battle myself personally, like, because I'm a big proponent of winning in business, sport, and life, and you defining that win. But we run up against this theme, especially, I'm going to speak for USAians, Americans, where we reach some point or level and then we pull the plug. We're done. And whether that's a Friday, right? It's Friday night happy hour theme, whether it's a retirement theme, whether it's, whatever it is, when I get a dollar amount theme. But when I study and look at high achievers, like true performers, not like Michael Jackson performer, but performer.
Right.
It's beyond it's beyond the finish line. It's more like a curiosity and a selfishness, and then also this amazing amount of, and I'm going to call it philanthropy, right? So even though they may make money or charge or whatever for that service or thing that they're giving to the world, there's still a huge gift in that, and it's kind of bigger. It's literally bigger than them. They're doing this thing. I mean, because think of how many people that we know that are real performers like that, and money, they don't need more money. Yet they keep pushing, right? They keep developing the new, I mean, what is it? Elon Musk. I mean, for crying out loud, like, really? Like, he could have been done at, what was it, PayPal or whatever it was. Like, and nobody would have hated him for it. But then it's Tesla and then SpaceX, and it's like, whoa, solar panels, all this stuff. I mean, and part of it, to me, I think, is just satisfying that very human drive, which is what you're talking about, which is to expand and grow and progress personally. And that's why I say selfish, not selfish as in greedy, but selfish like self-ish. I'm selfish. I want to see if I can make this thing work. How about that?
Yeah.
Because
and I actually have one of the steps in the book is all about the need for growth. And one of the things that I went through when I was sick, when I was having this kidney failure, but before I got the transplant, is I kind of just felt like I couldn't grow anymore because I kind of stopped working. I was starting to feel depressed, and like it just really made me realize that without growth, there just it's hard to be happy. We need to constantly keep moving. And it kind of gave me a glimpse of what it's like, to be old. Like I felt like I was old, and I just want to live my life in a way that even when I'm old in years, I still have that growth mindset that I keep wanting to learn and do new things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with that, because step 4, commit to growth, right? So
yeah.
All these steps. So you have 18 steps, and feel free to list them all. But I'm going to ask you what those steps are, or what are your favorites?
Yeah, so maybe the way that I'll answer it is just to kind of talk about the framework for the book. So there's four kind of groupings of these steps. And the first one is called Imagine the Life You Want. And so that's really about building the foundation for your life. That's where it's things like making a choice, committing to growth. It's also about like looking at your habits. What are the bad habits you have in your life? And how do you kind of get rid of those and start building good habits? Mm-hmm. And then the other one that's super important is defining your values. So once you've got those as your foundation, then the next big area is about becoming the happiest, healthiest version of you. And so that's where I talk about things that, you as a professional athlete would understand. So things like protecting your sleep, drinking enough water, eating better, meditation's in there, embracing gratitude, those kinds of things. And then once you've kind of done all this work that's really sort of selfish work, it's all work on yourself, then it's time to do the work where you start connecting more deeply with other people. So it steps about how to connect with others. I got a whole step on why we need to stop complaining.
That's an energy sucker. I have 4 energy suckers: complaining, complicating, worrying. I always forget the 4th one, and comparing. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. And so, no, that's good. And so what I talk about here is, that because some people, when I talk to people sometimes about how they need to stop complaining, they say, no, it's important to complain if you're treated badly or your kids are treated badly. You got to stick up for them. You got to complain. And I make the distinction, and this is actually something that I learned or I kind of realized after I went through that experience at the Y where I was going crazy about the mindfulness class, is that what really the effective way to do it is to advocate for yourself or your loved ones. And the difference between complaining and advocating is that when you're advocating, you actually have the ability to change things. You're actually trying to make things better. And if you're like complaining about the weather or something that you can't actually change, that's clearly complaining. If you're taking the steps to, try and improve your situation for your kids at school, and you're doing it in a constructive way, and it's making you feel empowered instead of making you feel weak and bad, then you're probably advocating. And so I have some instructions on there about how to know the difference between those two things. And then the last section of the book is more focused on organization and productivity. So once you've done this stuff within yourself, once you've got better relationships with other people, then you can turn to how do I get the right stuff done during the day? How do I prioritize and focus on what I need to get done, and how to kind of be the master of my time and my calendar?
Dude, so thank you. And the reason why I'm saying it like that is because it's so clear and concise. So working with people, and I work with a lot of them over these past years, when people set out to make a change, whatever that change is, they immediately want to get organized, which I appreciate. I honor that. However, if you're not strong at it, or if your values aren't in check, or if we're not entirely clear on what we really want, it doesn't matter how great your list is, or to-do items, or how many folders you have, or color-coded whatever spreadsheet, or if you're using Asana or Evernote, it just doesn't matter because the other stuff's not in line. So I love how you've taken this these 18 steps and distilled it down to these, I'm going to say compartments, but to these areas in an order that I think is more actionable. Because I think for me, I mean, it's a belief system, it's a value system, and it is driven by what you want. So, and I'm a believer that you actually are getting what you want. You actually are getting what you want right now. You may not like it, but but you must want it, right? Because whatever you're doing is driven essentially by some kind of belief system or value system you have. And therefore, and that's right. So there's an equation. There's math equations. There's word equations. There's kind of like, so that's the equation, right? Belief, feeling, action, result. So it's driven by some value system, some belief system, and so therefore you've arrived at, your station or your results. Now I get it.
Yeah.
No one chooses to be born. I understand that, and tragedy happens, and you could be driving down the street and get sideswiped. I get that. But in general, it's driven by that. And so if you're out there and you go out there and make a list, and the other thing I notice is people hide behind those lists. They're really good at like, oh, I'm getting to work. And then it's like they have this list, and then they have this spreadsheet, and they kind of hide behind all this organizing. I had a guest on my show, Anthony Trucks, and he says he calls it safe work. Right. So they're out there doing, creating the lists and more lists to lists and to-do lists, and they feel like they got something done. When it's just like, okay, I just kind of, rearranged the pool chairs, but I never actually got in the pool.
Right.
So
well, I think we're scared of getting in the pool, right? And that's why, the first thing that so many people do when they get into work is they check their email. And that's like the easiest thing to do, but
that's your warm up.
It's probably not the thing that you need to do to do your most important tasks of the day, to achieve your biggest goals and your wildest dreams. So you need to take the time to figure out what those are, and then organize your life in a way that you're delivering on that.
Okay. So during your journey, because it seems like you have these relationships with people and they're tight. Your sister, obviously, your wife. So let's talk about that process for you, and because when you're making change,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't just affect you. People do notice. And that's another thing that I deal with when I help people with stuff is they're making changes and they're becoming better. And what they start to realize is some of the people that they're rolling with don't necessarily understand it or appreciate it. And so relationship dynamics change. So did you experience any, I'm not even going to say negative or positive, but did you experience any of those dynamic changes? And what were some of those outcomes that because you're getting better. And you talk about dropping toxic people. So that's why this is.
Yeah. So there is, I would say, let me answer it for me personally first. I think that I was really lucky, and I don't think that I had any of those situations where, because of the changes that I was going through, that I had to make the tough decision to cut anybody out of my life. I will say that I have seen some, I do feel like it's impacting other people. So my wife has noticed the difference. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, because, it's important to say that I'm not perfect, right? Like I still have times where I get mad at my kids, and
no way.
It's not like all of a sudden I'm changing and I'm the perfect person in all aspects of my life. But I do feel like, because of the changes that I'm making, that I've got two sons, and I feel like for the older teenage son, that some of that's rubbing off on him. And, he's starting to make the decision to go to the gym more often and to eat better and to sleep better and these kinds of things that I talk about in the book. So, I look at him and I feel like, man, if I was so disciplined when I was 14 years old, then I wouldn't have gotten into a lot of the troubles that I got into later in my teens. So I'm almost a bit envious of that. But I do think it is important. I have this one of the steps is to ditch toxic people, because I think that is one of the things that's a barrier for so many of us, that we can have these great relationships in our lives, and then we can also have these relationships that make us feel bad about ourselves. And I kind of came up with this. I write blog posts at myinstructionmanual.com. And one of the posts that I wrote was a roundup of other posts that people had written when they turned 18. So there's this kind of meme that people do on blogs or on other social media sites that when you turn 18, you write 18 things I learned by the time I was 18 years old. And so I kind of found a bunch of the best and put them all into a blog post. But I read a ton of these posts, and one of the interesting things that I found that so many people had talked about was, from all over the world, people when they're 18 had realized that they, the harmful effect that having these toxic people in their lives can bring, and how much better it is when they get rid of these people that make them feel bad about themselves. So I thought it was important to include a chapter on that in the book.
Nice. Do you think that, because I think that's a hard one for people.
Yeah.
And it has been for me personally, because I have these really rich relationships, deep or extensive, with people. I've traveled the world and traveled the world with these people. And then when you retire from a thing, you kind of make your choices and go your ways. But man, I mean, there's certain people that I might have looked up to, and I see that they're not running at the same speed, and they're disgruntled or they're unhappy, and boy, do I try to help them and lift them up as best I can. However, to protect my own energy and my own being, if it as it is, it's super limited. It's limited to we'll grab a lunch, every other month, if that kind of thing, and check in, because otherwise, so it's kind of a bittersweet thing, right? Because I hear it. You're not the first person who said it, but it totally resonates, the dropping toxic people, because I think, and that's a strong word, toxic, right? That because there are people who are just bad. Right. And those are probably easier to drop. Like you're just not healthy for me. But then there's people who you actually do like, and they're not bad people per se. However, they're living in a way that is just not aligned with who you are or who you want to be, or within the life you want. And that's a hard conversation to have with people, which I've had to have with other people who are my clients and even myself. Like, wow, like, this is this person that I really admired or liked, or like we were tight. We were in the trenches together, and here we are. And it really goes also to that, what you can control and what you can't control, because otherwise, it's a kind of almost like a crab in a barrel type thing.
Well, I think you said it perfectly when you said what you can control and what you can't control, because I think the way to approach it is to recognize that you're making a choice. Yeah. So if you find yourself saying, oh man, I got to go to lunch with this person. No, you don't have to do anything, right?
No.
You can say this person can, I know this person sometimes makes me feel bad about myself, but I'm choosing to go for lunch with this person anyway, because I get this other benefit, or because, we've known each other for a long time and I feel like I owe something to him, or whatever. Mm-hmm. If you own that choice, then I think it's okay. Right. When it becomes even more difficult is when the toxic people in your lives are people like, your boss or your kids or your parents or your siblings, where it's much, much more difficult to get them out of your life. Mm-hmm. But you always have that choice. And as long as you recognize, I'm making a choice to stay in this job now, because I can't advocate to change within this job, but I know that this is not a great boss or whatever. If you own your choice, I think it makes it easier.
Totally. And it's hard because we live in a society now where, we are social, and I'm using air quotes right now. We're social. So Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever platform you want to call it, it's literally about likes.
Yeah.
I mean, and followers. And so, and I say that tongue in cheek, right? Because we know the likes are sometimes mindless, kind of just, I'm scrolling and the picture's pretty, so I like it. But, and we also know that that's not real engagement, but that's a whole other conversation. But I think on a subconscious level, it makes us more conflict avoidant, whether it's with other people or even within ourselves, right? And so then it begs the whole, how can I make things look even better? Operative word,
Right.
look, right?
Right.
Not be,
Yeah.
but look. And so you go into these relationships wanting to be liked, or at the very least not necessarily hurt anyone's feelings or whatever. You want to be cool, you want to be liked. And I see that a lot coming from the sports world, especially in bikes. We call it the bro bra network, where everyone's a bro, right? Everyone hangs out. Everyone, no one really wants to kind of upset the apple cart, because that person might end up working for being sponsored by or working for a company that, you know what I mean? So your opinions you pull back, right? And there's this kind of very surface relationship in some regards. But I see that happening and permeating. I mean, it's not just bikes, right? Like that, we're just a microcosm of society in general. So, and I see that on a bigger level. So, I think that's a huge thing, is dropping not only toxic people, but the relationship, right? If the relationship is toxic, meaning not serving you, right? Doesn't make them bad or you better. It really just is like, this isn't good for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And when you talk about social media, I can't actually remember where this was, but I know I was listening to someone talking on a podcast the other day, and they were just talking about how they recently went and kind of purged their social media account. So it was a woman talking about how she followed all these kind of fitness people, thinking that they would make her better at fitness, but then she realized that every time she was scrolling through and there were people in their in their fitness gear, they were just making her feel bad about herself. So she just decided to go and get rid of them from her feed. And I think that's important to set those kind of boundaries too, because I think, as you say, it's not just about people aren't even necessarily meaning to be toxic, but we can choose to let them hurt us.
Yeah, and so because you talk about diet,
Mm-hmm.
and I think diet extends beyond food, right? It's literally anything you take in.
Yeah.
So what are you taking in?
You can have McDonald's in all aspects of your life.
Right. So and what I love about that is that you can have, yes, there's a McDonald's of you're right, eye candy, ear candy, all of that stuff is candy, right? So it tastes good, but in the long run, it's probably not good for you.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
bits and pieces. So what are your thoughts on diet and what you take in? Because you talk about sanctifying your space. You really go into, you're hitting all the points on owning your life. And that's a big, I could be wrong, but I feel like there's people who are really scared of that concept, or they would just say, what does that mean? Just another, I own my life, kind of like get defensive about it. So what would be your pushback to the second one, and then what would be your advice to the person who might be scared of that daunting task of owning their life?
Well, yeah, I guess maybe to both it would be the same, and it's something that I already said, which is really that it's not about, well, so the person who's scared of it, I would say what I've already said, that it's not just about a huge step. It's it starts with a tiny step that you can make right now. And if each day you're getting a little bit better, then you're moving in the right direction. And you're going to have days where you're going to slip and you're not getting better. But if each week you're getting better, then you're still moving in the right direction, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say to the person who's scared. I think the person who maybe I should just define what I even mean by own your life. But basically what I'm talking about is that from my own personal experience, like I said, I didn't have that gold medal mindset. I had maybe a fourth place mindset. So to me, owning my life means understanding what it takes to kind of take possession of my life, so that I can own my choices, own my calendar, own my time. And it also has that kind of colloquial meaning of to own something where, you say you owned a video game or you owned an exam, which is more about just being awesome at it, kicking ass at it. So, I know not everybody's ready for it, and some people will never be. But but I had to go through this experience to realize that I was ready, and this is what I've learned so far.
That's
but
awesome.
You brought up diet. Diet. Do you want me to talk a bit about that section of the book? Because I think that's one that's interesting, because I think that so I read a bunch of different stuff about health and so on, and I think diet is an interesting one because every book has different advice.
Yes.
And I think that diet advice can be wrong in 4 different ways. So let me see if I can remember all of these. But I talk in the book about how it can be wrong because it is inconsistent, and there's so much different advice. And even so much is outdated. So even this idea that fat is bad for you still really permeates through a lot of health books, where really certain fats are really good for you. Mm-hmm. The second way that most diet advice is wrong is that it's unrealistic, because a lot of it comes from these nutrition purists who say things like we should harvest our own spring water, or we should never eat sugar, right? And that for most people that's not realistic. And I say it's misguided because so much of it focuses on losing weight, which is not at all the same thing as eating healthy.
Well, and it just becomes dogmatic and almost like religion. And I love religion, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, come on, like, really? Like, you're going to live a life where you don't have a cake on your birthday?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then the fourth thing I think that's wrong with so much nutrition advice is that it's biased, either because it's influenced by the food industry on one side, mm-hmm. even if you look at the food groups that we have both in the U.S. and Canada, biased either by the industry, or then so much diet advice, nutrition advice is biased, I think, by environmentalists and animal rights activists on the other side. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that eating food that's ethical isn't a good thing. I think it is, and in my house we eat mostly plant-based, but I do think that it's important to recognize that we shouldn't be confusing food that's ethical with food that's healthy, because mm-hmm. those are two different things. Right. So if you're focused first on health, then that's you got to think of that exclusively. So what I wanted to do is have advice in here that's science-based and simple. So I've got kind of just one overall rule, which is to choose foods with the highest ratio of nutrients to energy. So foods that are high in nutrients but low in calories. But then more specifically, I've listed just 3 foods that I think most people should be eating more of, and 3 that we should be eating less of. And so the ones that we should be eating more of, really, it's all plants. And the 3 that I talk about in particular are oats, green leafy vegetables, and legumes, because these are all foods that are high in nutrients and not so high in energy. And then foods that I think we all need to eat a lot less of, or most of us do, is foods with sugar. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying cut it out entirely, but I do think that the new evidence on kind of the long-term impact of sugar
for sure.
is something we need to take seriously.
But dang it, eat some birthday cake on your birthday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or donuts or pie, but celebrate.
Yeah. Or once a week or whatever.
Right.
But most of us do eat too much. Diet drinks, and then the third area is trans fat, where luckily it's getting reduced in most foods, but it still lingers in some things like icing that you buy in a store, and some syrups and things like that.
Yeah, I always what book was really a game changer for me was Eat Right for Your Blood Type.
Okay.
For me. And I recommend that to people just from and I think there's got to be an app for it, but for me, I recommend, or the reason why I recommend is just from a learning perspective, right? And back to what you said about choices. It's like, look, these are generally the things that work well with your blood type. And lo and behold, and what turned me on to that is I had a roommate who he was a smaller guy, and just worked out really hard and ate a lot and just couldn't gain weight and couldn't put on muscle. And granted, there's genetics involved in that, but he got that book and he started changing some things, and he was able to make better gains and actually hold weight and get on a better sleep schedule and all this other things that he kind of was like, something's off. So I got it for myself, and at the very least, it serves as a reference point for you, right? Your life, you choose. but another and it actually talks about those things you mentioned. And some people need more protein than others, and some people need more leafy greens than others. But yeah,
Right.
I think it's
Right.
I think it's super smart. If we can, I'd like to go back to the overall theme, which is the ownership theme, because that, generationally speaking, I just had a meeting with a company, and they're growing like crazy, and the employee engagement isn't as good as they'd like it to be, and part of that is because of the values, right? So you mentioned values, and I have not. This isn't the only company that I've come across, but there has been a value shift generationally. So you're in your 40s, correct?
That's right.
Right. So Gen X, right? We love owning shit.
Yeah.
like, and it's not like a greedy thing. Like we just appreciate it. Like, I want that car. I want the house. We like owning stuff, and we see value in it because you make the right purchases or investments, it appreciates in value, blah, blah, blah. Now, for instance, you probably have had records or tapes or CDs.
Yeah.
Yep, me too. And I love them. And I want the music on my phone. I don't want to lease music. I don't want to have access to music through some membership. Like, I don't want to have to rely on the cloud to access my 5,000 songs. I want them all with me everywhere I go. Right? That's my worldview. But the ownership piece, wow. Like, I think ownership, I'm going to go a little deep here. We go a little existential on the gold medal mindset. And I say we, it's me. So you'll have to bear with me. But I feel like the ownership piece, that's something that has been devalued over time. And the issue I have with that, personally, I'm getting on a soapbox here, is that there is pride in ownership. Like, you treat your own things better than you treat your house better than you treat the rental unit that you're going for spring break.
Right.
You treat your car better than the rental car. You treat your children, hopefully, better than the kid next door, right? Because they're yours. Mm-hmm. So, or at least you expect more out of them. So it's interesting, though, but we're at a point now where it's like, oh, yeah, just lease the phone. Really? Like, lease the phone? Like, can I buy it? I mean, you can, but we know they're ridiculous. Get a membership and access any song you want. Well, can you do that when you're flying overseas? Like, home ownership. That's like, oh, I don't want that responsibility. I want to be able to move around. But my point is, we're kind of like, what's the word when you hire out?
Outsourcing?
Yeah, we're outsourcing our lives to apps, to other entities, to corporations, to whatever. And this isn't like a anti-corporation thing, but subconsciously, the subtext is kind of like, I don't value ownership. And yet, the whole point, and I think kind of the premise, not only of your book, but in your own life to really get the most out of it, is to take it on, right? To really like, this is mine, and I want to make the most of it, and here's how I own it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It reminds me of the fact that there's definitely a lot of millennials who are interested. I think more than Gen X's were, in their 20s with the idea of personal development and self-improvement. And I think some of it comes down to the fact that they were kind of raised more protected than we were, right? Like we went out at night and we would come home before dark and that was okay. Where they grew up in a generation where, their parents wanted to know where they were at every moment. And so I think as they're becoming adults, like there's this term that they coined called adulting, and there's much more focus on what it means to be an adult and trying to learn how to live. So a lot of the things that I talk about in the book, I think resonate with them. What I don't know is whether whether that's all of them or just the ones that I'm hearing about. Like maybe there's a big chunk who sort of feel lost and don't feel like they can own their lives for the reasons that you mentioned, that they live in this outsourcing kind of world. But also because they grew up so protected where their parents were making maybe more decisions for them than ours did for us.
Yeah. Well, this owner basically said actually not this owner. It was another gentleman that was researching this project that I was doing, but he's in the restaurant business. He said he's had parents call in for their kids.
Right.
Adult age.
Wow, that's crazy.
Right. So that's pretty amazing. So, and it's not to like, I'm going to jump on the millennials. That's not the issue. It's just kind of finding the value points. But I also think that it's not even their fault necessarily, because I see that bleeding into people of our generation where we've, little things like remembering phone numbers. We just don't do that anymore because there's no need. Things like that. So we've outsourced certain parts of our brain to technology. I get that. But yeah, I just see the whole ownership thing becoming, especially when it comes to like real things, devalued. So, but there is a responsibility, and what I get is, this not being tied down, right? This wanting to be free, this wanting to be, but even owning that, there's a responsibility to that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you want to have this life where you can make any choice you want, and you can, but if you want to have this life where you're not tied down, you want to have this life where you can, go to dinner when you want, or go on a vacation, or take time off, well then that's going to require quite a bit of ownership, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, I mean, I don't know if it. I don't think that means that you need to, as you say, own your CDs and your DVDs. Correct. But our lives are different.
Right.
We've only got one.
Right.
And so we got.
Right. And I use the CDs and the DVDs and the music as an example of just how ownership as a concept has become, less of a thing, so to speak.
Yeah.
So to speak. Well, all right.
Yeah, I will say that when I was a people manager of millennials, that they did have an approach. Like I think they did believe that they had ownership over the company in a way that other people didn't. So as long as they felt that the company was kind of going in the right direction, they felt this really strong ownership.
Yep.
If they didn't feel that, then they were out the door.
Right.
But I did feel like they could be some of the most committed employees. For
sure. Yeah, showing that you have a vested interest in their success, showing that the company is somehow aligned with things that they value. Totally. Yeah, for sure. And really, that's actually in many ways more healthy than how we might have looked at it back in the day when we were graduating college and high school.
Right. So we still thought we might have one job for life.
Yeah, exactly. I actually knew that wouldn't be the case. I was fortunate in that regard, but I think that's because I had a parent who was an entrepreneur. But
that's good.
Yeah, fortunate, right? But the funny thing was, right? So I have a parent who was an entrepreneur, and he like looks at me and he's like, "Just get a job. What do you?" So, and I know that's like dad loving on me and protecting me, but
right.
However, being a psychologist and being intellectually honest, I do ask like, why would he go there? And it's not like for any lack of belief in me. I think it's just because he knows the life of the entrepreneur and the pains and what that can bring as well. So it's just kind of interesting. I'm going to ask you the golden question on the gold medal mindset, and that is, and this has been a great conversation. Hope to meet you in person, face to face. Be fun.
That would be great. Yeah.
What is one thing you wish every human knew?
You don't need to wait for a life-changing event to change your life. And so I feel like it took me, my illness and my sister giving this amazing gift to me for me to realize I had to change my life. And I think so many people kind of go through their days not embracing it, not feeling like today's the day to make that change. but since I've started, doing my podcast and researching, I've just been intrigued by how many people there are who have shown this post-traumatic growth. So gone through something traumatic, who make a decision to change their lives for the better. And I don't think it happens to everyone. I think some people can go in the opposite direction. And obviously post-traumatic stress disorder is a real thing. But I think that for some people, they can evolve into kind of a post-traumatic growth. And so, so I would really say that make a decision to change your life today. Don't wait.
Perfect. You don't have to wait for a life-changing event to change your life. That's definitely going on like the top 5 list of that question. Well done.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. I do appreciate it. Oh, I do have one more question. I lied. How can people find you, connect with you, get a hold of you, hire you, be next to you, listen to you talk, read your book, all the above? How can they, where are you in the ether, out in the ether of the internets and the real world and all the above?
So myinstructionmanual.com, they can find pretty much everything that's me there, my blog, my podcast, links to the book, lots of free downloads. The easiest place to find the book, it comes out on March the 6th, and the easiest place to find it's going to be on Amazon. For the podcast, you can basically find it wherever you listen to podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, it's everywhere. On Twitter, I'm at Keith McArthur, Facebook.com/myinstructionmanual. And I really just love to hear from people directly. So people can also email me at keith@myinstructionmanual.com.
Perfect. He's done this before, people. He used to be in PR. It's not as bad. Anyways, Keith, it was awesome having you on the show. I hope you are willing to come back. I have the sneaking suspicion this isn't going to be your only book. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to mine for gold on the Gold Medal Mindset podcast. Let's keep the conversation going on Twitter at RealDrJRich or on the web at drjasonrichardson.com. That's drjasonrichardson.com. Take care and have a great day.